A very good evening and a very warm welcome for today's webinar, which is on Beyond the Will, Protecting Your Family if you are alive but mentally incapacitated. We often plan for future with the thought of either living long, healthy lives or making provision in case of death. However, one important scenario that is rarely discussed is the possibility of being alive but unable to make decisions due to mental incapacity caused by illness, accident, or age-related conditions. In today's session, which is designed and highlighted on what Indian law says about who can make decisions regarding your health and assets if you are mentally incapacitated. What are the practical steps to ensure financial continuity without court battles? And the personal steps which are the speakers have experienced and taken to protect his own family. So today for discussion of this topic, we have Mr. Harsh Rumta. So thank you, sir, for taking up today's session today. So let me allow a quick introduction about our speaker today. Mr. Harsh Rumta is a chartered accountant and principal officer of Fee Only Investment Advisor LLP, which is a SEBI registered advisory firm with prior senior leadership experience at ICICI, and he later founded and successfully exited ventures like apnaloan.com and apnapaisa.com. He's a former chair of ARI, serves on the governing council of Sahamati, and is a member of SEBI's AIPAC. A recognized personal finance expert, he also writes a fortnightly column, A Truth Be Told, in a Business Standard. So thank you, sir, for today's webinar and taking today's discussion go ahead. So before we start, just two, three housekeeping announcements. We'll be taking the questions at the end of the webinar. Our speaker will be happy to answer all the questions. And the certification of participation will be provided to the attendees within 3-4 working days. And the recording of the webinar will be available on NISM YouTube channel. And I would like to highlight, especially mention the today's topic, which is majorly on the disability, not on inheritance. So without taking any further time, I would like to hand over the today's dias to our esteemed speaker. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Amirji. Good evening, everyone. This is a part of the series of very interesting investor education webinars that the National Institute of Securities Market has been conducting. Uh, Let me talk about what today's webinar is not about. Amirji mentioned this is not about wills, this is not about inheritance issues. So, we'll not be answering any questions about inheritance issues or wills, which are quite popular. I've done this kind of a webinar before, and a lot of questions come on inheritance. Today, we will stick to what happens if you don't die. But, you know, if you are mentally incapacitated, unable to take decisions, what happens to the who takes the decisions on medical? How is your will recognized in that? Your wishes recognized in that, and you know, how can the financial assets of the affected person be used for their own benefit? I mean, that really is the subject matter of what we are going to talk today. Uh, so this all started with this is very personal to me, and this started as a personal experience. The date August 19, 2016. My father, who was then 83 years old, he suffered from a stroke, and which left him at that point of time, at the time when he suffered the stroke, he was completely unconscious. He was in a coma. He slowly came out of it, but his bodily functions were heavily impacted. He was not able to recognize people at that time. Forget about talking, he obviously could not talk. Even communication through sign language, slowly as he started getting his mental faculties back. But even then, at the initial stages, even communication through sign language was very, very difficult. Obviously, he could not sign. He clearly was bedridden. He spent the last 6 years of his life, he passed away in 2022. The last 6 years of his life, he spent on bed. Medical attention ensured that he survived. And this entire event. It impacted all our lives, my life, my family's life, in many, many ways. But let me dwell on two major things, right? That which is the subject matter of interest today. One was taking that decision regarding use of artificial life support devices, and second was accessing the financial assets of my father for his own benefit. Instantly, as he got the stroke, we admitted him in the hospital. The first thing that we struggled with, where, this decision that the doctors asked us to make. At that time, he was critical, and the doctor said that if he stays like this, we may have to put him on ventilator. Please tell us whether or not you want to use that ventilator. So this was completely unexpected. Uh, Obviously, we had never spoken about it. In Indian families, there is no tradition. I mean, we don't talk of death, we don't talk of sex, we don't talk of money. I mean, death, sex, and money. Those are two things. Those are three things that are completely taboo. My father belongs to the old school. I mean, very, very clearly, these are not conversations that I've had with him. I had no idea on what he would have wanted. It was a very tough. I was playing God. Literally, I was playing God, and it was an extremely tough decision for me to take. Although my sister is elder to me, but given the paternalistic society that we live in, this decision was expected from me, and it was a tough decision. So me, my spouse, my children, my sister, her children, a couple of our uncles, we all got around to take this. And please remember, we were under time pressure. This was such a huge decision. Fortunately, we were able to take a decision. We were able to convey that decision. Fortunately, it was never required. He recovered enough that the use of ventilator was never required. But that whole process of taking that, decision was so emotionally draining that I wondered how other people do it, and why we should force them. Why, if something similar happened to me, why I should force my family to take that decision without knowing what I would have wanted in a similar situation. So that was one of the first things that we sort of did after we got our breath back. We all sat together as a family, and we sort of worked out what we would have wanted. And I think that is something that's quite critical, as I realized only after personal experience. The second aspect, which was accessing my father's assets for his own benefit, that of course happened later. And even the earlier decision on ventilator, uh, you know please remember that we didn't have at least the issue of financial resources. The financial resources, fortunately, they were enough. So that was not an added pressure, and I was wondering that if that pressure had been there on me as well, because it is very expensive. If that additional pressure had been there on me, how would I have taken that decision? It is really, really a very, very tough thing for a family to decide, especially when they have no idea what the individual would have wanted. Coming back, so, we confronted the financial aspects only after he returned home. We found out that we could not access his financial assets despite being his nominees. Okay. Uh, the law just didn't cover this kind of an eventuality. And just to understand that, a very quick run through of the facts in my case. So, my father is a widower, was a widower who stayed independently. He had ample financial means. He had a small staff of two people who supported him in the small home office that he ran. He was very meticulous in maintaining his records. I had no problem taking over, finding out the various things. All the records were there perfectly. He never used banking or a debit card. Fortunately, his mobile and email IDs, the email ID he didn't operate, his staff operated, but fortunately they were registered with the bank, with the demat, with the broker. His staff would go to the bank, and withdraw cash for household expenses. All other payments were made by check. All his financial assets were owned in his individual name. He had nominations in place for all his assets. He had made a will. He had registered that will. My elder sister and I were the only legal heirs. So all this, he was very well prepared. He was very meticulous in his record keeping. So in many ways, he was fully prepared. But those preparations were completely inadequate for disability, as we discovered. Because, preparations for death help only after death. In the interim situation, when the person is unable to take those decisions, all the preparations for death are complete. The will is a piece of paper till the individual dies. So the will does not help. Nomination does not help. All those things does not help. So what did we do in my father's case? Fortunately for us, my father regained enough mental faculties back that he could be deemed to be, not be mentally incapacitated. And therefore, there are existing provisions that help people like him to be able to access their financial resources. And those were the things that we used. Even those are not easy, as I will explain. So he had three bank accounts. The first bank account, again, as I said, in all the bank accounts, his email ID and mobile number was already imputed. He never operated them through internet banking, but fortunately they were recorded. The first bank was, I think it was frighteningly simple for him to gain access to that account. All that he had to do, and we helped him do that, was to create that internet banking account, give out the OTPs, and then he was able to get access to that account. There was no need for him to give a thumb impression, which is what happened in the other two banks. In the second bank, which was his major bank account, uh, though that bank agreed to add my sister and I as co-account holders based on an authority that my father gave by putting his thumb on the various documents. The bank's officer came home, and obviously then he has gone back and certified that my father understood that he was giving authority to me through the thumb impression. So please remember, this is now my father is not mentally incapacitated. Therefore, he was able to do that. In the third bank, which was a public sector bank, again, we followed the same process. They just had one more thing. They said, we will remit the money to the second bank. Okay, so that they just added one more second layer because there was a sizable deposit that was there in the third bank. Again, there I remember it was a quite a process to try and get that officer of the bank to come home at a time when my father was awake and had better faculties. Anyway, that happened, and all these things we were able to do, and therefore able to use the my father's resources for his own benefit. He had a sizable portfolio of shares, again based on a power of attorney given through a thumb impression, and based on a authorization given by him as evidenced by a thumb impression and witnessed by an officer of the DP provider, which happened to be a bank. Again, my name was added as a power of attorney holder for that demat account. So all this you will notice was possible because my father was able to give a thumb impression and able to convey his approval in a manner that was satisfactory to the bank or the demat provider's officer when he visited home. All this incident, it at that time, it took us really some amount of running around before we were able to do it. Fortunately, and I used to keep wondering, our family could afford that interganem. We had financial resources to be able to afford that. What happens if financial resources are tight? And there were significant financial resources that were needed for his treatment. Uh, Anyways, that led me what, and that started my interaction with this topic on how disability is to be handled. I've subsequently used that for our clients. I've used it for public advocacy, as we will clearly see. It sparked research on if he had been completely mentally incapacitated, what was a way that it could have been done, or how is it being done in India? And this is what I found. So let's divide that into two parts. The first part is the relating to the health insurance, relating to health decisions. Who takes those decisions? What kind of treatments to give? What kind of treatments not to give? All those kind of things are broadly, let us say, called advanced medical directive. That the individual decides in advance how those decisions ought to be, who will take those decisions, where would the individual like the treatment to be done, what kind of treatments would the individual like to be done or not be done, when can those treatments be withheld, when can those treatments be turned off. Those are kind of things that can all be mentioned in this document called Advanced Medical Directive. For handling this, and it's colloquially called a living will. You will hear this term in various ways, and the term will being used there makes people confused that it has to do with inheritance. It has nothing to do with inheritance, and in the manner in which it is used, at least in India, from what I can understand, it is basically an advanced medical directive, advanced directive on how the medical decisions are to be taken. And what does this typically have? It will typically have what treatment preferences, whether the person wants cardiopulmonary resuscitation, whether the person wants a ventilator or not, whether the person wants dialysis or not, whether the person wants nutrition to be given through an uh, intravenous sources or not. Where would the person like to be treated? In an ICU, in a ward of the hospital, in a hospice? Again, hospices, as you know, I watched a very interesting video of the Living Will clinic that Hinduja Hospital conducts. Dr. Roop Gursahani, I watched him talk about the fact that hospices in India are basically meant only for cancer patients. So what happens about patients who are mentally incapacitated? Uh, Fourth could be home. The individual may want to spend the time, the last stages of his life among his family members. What kind of pain relief and comfort measures the individual would wish? And sometimes, there is a trade-off between, giving pain relief and shortening life. Now, that is an individual choice, which an individual should be able to express, and that is typically expressed in a living will. End of life choices: do not resuscitate me, do not do heroic measures, withdraw futile treatments, the wishes regarding organ donation, all this again can be contained. in a living will. Appointment of a person who will take decisions on their behalf. If that person is not available, then an alternative person. Whether those decisions will be taken jointly, whether that one person will be taking that decision, any directions to that person. Because when that person is taking that decision, like I took in the case of my father, had I been aware of what my father wanted, I would have made that it would have still remained a difficult decision, but I would have made it with far more confidence than I did at that particular point of time. The scope and limitations. When do you want this will, this living will or the advanced medical directive to be applicable? You know, uh, what are the kind of things that should still be treated, etc., etc. So these are the typical contents of an advanced medical directive, or what is colloquially known as a living will. And now, fortunately, because of what I would call a Supreme Court created law, there is no law in India that deals with living wills, but the Supreme Court has created and then has subsequently made sure that, they have clarified and then made sure that this has become practical to apply. There under that Supreme Court omnibus decision, okay, creating and registering a living will has become possible. So, what are the conditions? Obviously, the person while making the living will has to be of sound mind. He has to make the living will voluntarily and without coercion. Obviously, it should be signed by the person in the presence of two independent witnesses. It must be notarized or, in the presence of a gazetted officer. Earlier, it used to be, before clarification was issued by the Supreme Court in 2023, earlier a bottleneck was that this had to be attested by a judicial magistrate first class. Fortunately, I think that has been removed. It can now be a simple notarization, which is much easier to do. Copies need to be kept basically with a family physician, immediate family members, and a custodian. Now, that is a bit of a bottleneck in Karnataka. In Maharashtra, these custodians are being appointed. Typically, you have a panchayat executive officer or a municipal officer who's being appointed. So in Bombay, we have these appointments have started, and in Karnataka they have started. I think other states are going to follow up because this is under a Supreme Court order. But this machinery is still falling in place. So this particular part, the custodian, this is still falling in place. But that does not stop anybody from doing the first steps. Even if you don't live in Maharashtra or Karnataka, nothing stops you from creating a living will based on these guidelines and then registering it as in when the machinery will get created, it should get created sooner rather than later. And then comes if at all, there is no, it's not necessary that a living will have to be used, that somebody will become incapable of taking decisions, health related decisions on their own behalf. Uh, you know, if it is required to be used, the process is that the treating physician will check if a valid will exists. Has it been registered with the appropriate authorities? Then the hospital will create a primary medical board consisting of three senior doctors of the hospital. See, these are, there are better people than me to sort of explain this. I'm just putting this across. This is a broad framework. In the legal implementation, things, this is still falling in place. I do not know in how many cases has a hospital actually used a living will. So this part of it is still work in process. So primary medical board, will be formed by that hospital. There will be three senior doctors, a secondary medical board, can be formed by the same hospital or another hospital again within 48 hours. And if both the boards agree, then the living will can be acted upon. There is an oversight that has been provided, which is that whatever decision is taken when the living will is actually implemented, then that decision needs to be informed to a judicial magistrate first class. It's not very clear exactly how the jurisdictions will work. At least it's not clear to me. Maybe I think to the people who are active in this area, very active in this area, they would clearly know how this works. Approval is no longer required from the magistrate. It is just to be informed to them. But as I said, all this is work in progress. And obviously, if there is a dispute or a refusal to implement, the family or the executor can approach the High Court under Article 226. So, what would an individual do today when this Supreme Court created law has been put into place and is in the process of being rolled out and implemented? One, of course, the living will should appoint a surrogate decision maker, somebody who will take those decisions. This is not written in isolation. So this needs to be reviewed and updated. Like anything else, this is not a one-time activity. It needs to be accessible, because what is the point of writing a living will that is not accessible at the time when it is needed? Okay, and it needs to be discussed. I think the last point may not be a legal point, but that is the most important point. People, as I said, in Indian families, we do not discuss death, sex, and money. And disability is in inevitably linked with death, and therefore this is not dining table you know uh, this is not a dining table conversation in any family. What we are now doing, or at least I can share what we do in our own family, is that when we go on our family holidays, we set aside what I call money time. During that time, we discuss not just everything, what are our investments, what are the other things, but we also rediscuss, reconfirm, reaffirm whatever our views, the developing views that we might have had on disability as well. This is very, very important. And one big role for advocacy, the advocates for this, one big role is to foster discussions among family members on these very, very vital issues. So recently, in terms of practical implementation, we have Karnataka, as I mentioned, Maharashtra. These custodians are being notified. In fact, in Maharashtra, state portal is being developed, and a very, very interesting thing is that Hinduja Hospital, under the guidance of Dr. Roop Gursahani, they've launched India's first living will clinic, and those videos are available. A lot of this data and a lot of this information has been, among other sources, that has been a source that has been used. They help patients draft, notarize, and circulate their directives. So I'm just going to summarize: make the living will, notarize it, deposit it with designated authority, and hopefully that designated authority will be available soon in your area as well. And inform your family and doctor. And obviously, if needed, the hospital and medical boards will evaluate to authorize the execution. So that was living will. How that at least we have a provision. It's not law, but it is Supreme Court mandated law, so it's as good as law. But for access to financial assets, unfortunately, there is no way today other than following a very tortuous legal process, long, expensive, and time consuming. You do a Google search, or nowadays more commonly do a Chat GPT search, etc. And you know, what do people have to do to get access to the financial resources of their loved ones to be used for the benefit of their loved ones themselves when the loved ones have, become incapacitated? And these are a little old decisions. You will see multiple new decisions that are there, where the spouse has been appointed, the brother has been appointed, sister has been appointed, and it's a process. It's a real process that one has to go through. The landmark decision here is in Shobha Gopal Krishnan's case of the Kerala High Court, and uh, the benchmarks laid down there, those are being followed in most other cases. So this are the series of benchmarks that were laid down in the Shobha Gopalakrishnan case. One, the guardian has to provide details of the property. So, like in my father's case, that was no problem. His records were so good. Okay. But imagine a lot of people do not keep good track records. I mean, one big issue is people keeping track of their assets. Unclaimed assets in India are more than 2 lakh crores. Please read the articles that I have written on that. So this is again a lesson in keeping track of your own assets so that they go to your loved ones or can be used for your own benefit. So one, the guardians have to give details of the property in respect of which they want to be appointed as guardians. Then the High Court, and this goes to the High Court. So the High Court has to appoint a medical board, and then you need to be visited by a revenue officer, maybe a tehsildar, collector, deputy collector, and typically they will depute somebody junior from their teams, and they will submit a report on close relatives of the person and their financial condition. So, because the court is worried that these provisions should not be used to abuse the resources of a person. So the court is in the position, as they say, the king is the protector of all the subjects. When the subjects themselves can't protect themselves, the king protects them, and the court acts as the surrogate for the king, the government, and therefore it needs to make sure that there is no abuse, and that is the reason for all these sort of safeguards to be built in. As all of us know, that dealing with government officials is not the easiest thing in the world. It's not the friction-free thing that one would. It's full of friction. That dealing is full of friction. Typically, the courts prefer that a person who's seeking to be appointed as a guardian should be a close relative and preferably a legal heir, which means that spouses are the easiest, children are easiest, if not, then parents or siblings, etc. Uh, there has to be a social welfare officer who needs to be notified. If somebody objects, because it could be abused, or somebody else may feel that the uh, resources are not being used for the best interests of the individual concerned, then they can appeal to the court to sort of remove the guardian. And the court obviously has full powers to revoke the guardianship if it also concurs with the fact that there has been a misuse of powers. And guardians are only, so they have to name the specific properties, and only for those properties they become guardians. So if they discover another property later, then you have to go again to the court to again get appointed as guardian for that specific property. the guardian has to file periodic reports with the Registrar General of the court, who maintains a register of all such persons appointed as guardians in the state. And last, and this was the one that sort of shook me the most, that court approval is required to move patient outside the state. Now, I think that one of the best things that I did in my life was to take my father to the ancestral home in Rajasthan, where he spent a night in the room where he had spent a large part of his youth, and that was his real wish. Now, if he had been mentally incapacitated, and I had been appointed as a guardian under the court laws, I would have to seek approval for that trip. Anyways, that trip was difficult because, try carrying a, medical sick person through the airlines, etc. It's not an easy ride. I can tell you it's not easy. And the number of certificates that we carried and the number of levers that I had to pull to sort of make that trip go off smoothly. But if you added a friction like you have to take court approval, I do not know whether we would have been able to do it. So what happens? So this is the Indian position, right? What happens internationally? And internationally, and I'm going to give the example of UK, but there are US examples, and there are other countries examples, Europe's example, etc., where similar legislation exists and similar infrastructure exists. They may be called different names. There could be slight variations in how they are rolled out, but essentially, the infrastructure and the framework exists for making sure that the interests of an incapacitated individual is taken care of by a person that the individual themselves have nominated, with some guardrails around to ensure that the abuse is not there. Ensure is a very strong word, to reduce the possibility of abuse. So it is primarily done by something called a durable power of attorney or a lasting power of attorney. So the thing with powers of attorney is that the legal rule is that an power of attorney holder can do only what the principal themselves can do. So if the principal themselves is mentally incapacitated and unable to contract, then the power of attorney holder cannot contract themselves. So the power of attorney becomes useless. By law, therefore, they have provided for what is called a durable power of attorney or a lasting power of attorney. And we'll now use the word lasting power of attorney because that's what is used in the UK, whose example I'm going to give. The lasting power of attorney allows the power of attorney holder to continue acting on behalf of the principal, notwithstanding the fact that the principal has now become incapacitated. So they have a proper act, the Mental Capacity Act 2000. So a lot of this information is thanks to public advocacy websites like Vidhi Legal or Money Life Foundation. Money Life Foundation has come up with a complete white paper on this. Vidhi Legal has done huge amounts of work. Hinduja Clinic, as I mentioned, have done a lot of work on this. The Mental Capacity Act of the UK creates a framework for decision making when a person loses the capacity to make decisions. The lasting tools that they have created, the key tools, lasting power of attorney, office of the public guardian, and the court of protection. And the purpose of this framework is to sort of create, balance the ability of an individual to guide decision making when he is no longer able to take those decisions, and balance that with safeguards against abuse, because the individual themselves may not be in a position to complain about abuse. So the lasting power of attorney are of two kinds. One is what we call a living will, which is basically relating to the health and welfare. So that first part exists in India in some form and manner, in a fairly strong manner, actually. Uh, it's the health and welfare lasting power of attorney, which deals with care and treatment decision, life sustaining, artificial life maintenance. Obviously, this becomes applicable only if the capacity to take decisions is lost, right? The second part, and this is a separate power of attorney, to maybe to separate people, maybe to the same person, which is the property and financial affairs lasting power of attorney, which deals with bank accounts, bills, properties, investments, mutual funds, uh, you know demat accounts, etc. And this can be used. So this is like any other power of attorney. It can be used immediately also, as long as the person giving the power of attorney agrees, or it may be conditional, that it is to be used only if that person becomes incapable of taking decisions. So it makes sure that while you are in a position to control those investments and those finances, etc., you don't necessarily have to surrender or share control with somebody else. It is a very important point that I have realized when we have spoken to clients. I have seen, people who have been, married for maybe 30 years, 40 years, uh, hesitating to give an unconditional power of attorney even to their spouses. Hesitation while giving power of attorney to children is also there. Obviously, if there is a power of attorney that you give to a non-related individual, or a individual who's related a little more long distance, I think that hesitation only compounds and becomes larger, and that's perfectly understandable. I don't think anybody should be judgmental on this, because please remember, these are assets that an individual has toiled all their years to gather. That those are the assets that will help them, throughout their lives, till their lives are there. And to hand over control of that is something that people will find it difficult to do. It's also a reflection of the kind of social relationships that we have in our society today, and it speaks very much that just like we work on our financial investments to deliver security for ourselves, we need to work on our social investments, on our family ties, on our ties with on with friends, to be able to similarly deliver returns that will help us lead a fulfilling life, even if we don't lose capacity. Of course, if we lose capacity, it becomes even more difficult. So they have these oversight bodies, which is the Office of the Public Guardian. So, where you register both these power of attorneys, the health LPAs and the financial assets LPAs. That Office of the Public Guardian, which is akin to the nodal officer that, we saw here in the Indian context, that also supervises. Here it's just a registry. There it also supervises the attorneys, and it also investigates misuse. And more importantly, is there is a specialized court of protection that specializes only in this. So they have some expertise, subject matter expertise, and it is a judicial forum. They will decide disputes based on the investigation by the Office of Public Guardian. They can remove attorneys if needed. Uh, in cases where no LPAs exist, the same court of protection, instead of going to the High Court, The same court of protection will appoint deputies where no LPAs have been made. So quick flow, if a capacity is lost, okay, the attorney steps in as per a pre-registered LPA. The attorney's actions are supervised by the Office of the Public Guardian. If there is a dispute or there is a misuse, then it is escalated to the Court of Protection, and the court can resolve the disputes, remove attorneys, appoint fresh attorneys, appoint deputies, etc. So if I was to summarize the key safeguards, because this needs safeguards, this is a process that lends itself to abuse, and therefore these safeguards are very much needed. No matter if those safeguards, in cases where it is your loved ones, then those safeguards may sort of stifle you, but still those safeguards are needed. Uh, the the lasting power of attorneys need to be registered with the Office of Public Guardian before they can be used. They need to there needs to be a certificate provider who clearly certifies that the donor acted freely without coercion, is of sound mind. The donor can specify whatever they wish. So that is the best part. They can give directions or leave it to the best judgment of the power of attorney holder, or leave it to the judgment of the power of attorney holder, but ask them to take certain things in account. If they say that some things have to be kept in account, then the decisions of the lasting power of attorney holder will have to be in line with the wishes of the person who gave that power of attorney. So it's very powerful, actually. The attorneys by law are required to act in the best interests of the donor. That I think is very, very important, and what in legal terms is called they act in a fiduciary capacity. They are required to put the best interests of the donor. Uh, Keep that in mind while taking any decisions, and therefore this combination of Office of Public Guardian plus the Court of Protection, this provides a strong oversight and a recourse structure if abuse occurs. And at the same time, it provides an enabling framework that gives peace of mind for somebody who is appointing this. As I mentioned, my lasting apprehension, we have a family history. My grandfather spent the last 3 years of his life in bed with reduced cognition. My father, as we already saw, spent the last 6 years of his life similarly. A couple of my uncles had the same thing. My grandfather's brother had the same thing. It is something that I really, really am apprehensive about. A structure like this is something that would give me a lot of comfort. A structure that will come into place, that has already been, has been in practice and has been used, will really give comfort to a lot of people. So having seen this structure, what are the gaps that we see? So very clearly, for the living will, for the health related issues, it is a Supreme Court denominated law, powerful nonetheless, but a legislated law done by the legislature is always better than a court denominated law, which has been carved out from, the fundamental right of, the right to live. I think a legislated law is always much more powerful. Uh, and the machinery to oversee the practices is still evolving. This is right now, even for registration, the machinery in the medical end, and the machinery where the decisions that are taken to activate the uh, living will. I think those are still evolving, and I think will require a lot of work. This is a growing problem, and this is something we need to fix. The the second part of accessing financial assets for the benefit of the individuals, no legal provisions. And, we only have this tortuous court process that I outlined. It's better than not having anything, okay? But obviously, it's not enough. And clearly, we need, something much better. So while all this is happening, okay, what are people doing currently? Okay, what are the practical steps that people are doing? I think advanced medical directive, as I said, as I mentioned, is already active. Maybe there are issues in getting it registered. Okay, but I think that's where the kind of clinic that, say, the Hinduja hospital runs, or you look at the excellent draft, and this is being shared with you through the chat link. The advanced medical directive, at least get that notarized. Even if in your state or your city, the registration authority is not available, at least get this notarized. The big thing is that when you prepare this document, you will talk this over with your family. And I think that in many cases is 90% of the battle. Let's start talking about this. This is something that could happen to you. And this, the conspiracy of silence around this and waiting for a bad thing to happen, is something that may not really bode well for the society as a whole. The Obviously, where registration is allowed, we send it to the registration authorities. Or I think let us start approaching these advocacy functions that are existing to find out where such kind of advanced medical directives can be registered. What about the practical steps that can be taken to access financial assets? Okay. So solutions currently, as I said, is a tortuous court process. Okay. For immovable assets, there is no solution that exists without, a law being uh, enacted. I mean, I've met some lawyers who said that you could do a registered power of attorney so I have myself, me and my spouse have given registered power of attorney to each other because it does not cost anything in Bombay to do it in favor of your spouse for a residential flat. We have done it, but legally it's not, it's not something that can fly, because if you are mentally incapacitated, the power of attorney will cease to have any impact. For movable assets, Vinayak has raised his hand. Give me a minute, Vinayak. We were running out of time. Let me go through and then we'll answer your question. Uh, Movable assets, some solutions are there, and this is the typical ingenious solutions that we Indians are great at finding within the confines of the laws that we have. All solutions require somebody that you absolutely trust. Okay, otherwise the solutions don't work. Okay, so not all of us are blessed with this ability to put our entire financial lives in their hands. So I think it is very important that we have peoples like that. So for bank accounts, if you can have joint accounts with either or survivor, anyone or survivor, etc., that's a solution, because if one person is incapacitated, the other person can operate the bank account. And this is the key. The bank account is the key, because any other asset ultimately will flow into the bank account. So if you have control, if you are able to exercise bank accounts, then a lot of other things sort of fall into place. For mutual funds, again, you can have anyone or survivor joint accounts. Okay, and the joint account holder, if it is it's called either or survivor, then either of the holders can operate that joint account. Please realize, when either can operate, which means there is joint control, the other person can take out the money, okay, and you won't be able to do anything about it. So as I said, all these solutions require absolute trust in the other person. There can be a notarized power of attorney from the holder for a trusted person to operate the account. Okay. But if it is registered beforehand, okay, it will mean sharing control of the asset. In any case, the power of attorney ceases to have the any impact once the person becomes incapacitated. The only issue with movable assets is how will the AMC or the mutual fund company know that the person has become incapacitated. Anyways, if that power of attorney is registered, okay, then anyways they will be able to operate, and they may continue to operate, notwithstanding the fact that the power of attorney is now no longer legally valid. So, this is a very much a gray area. The joint account is not a gray area. Joint account is a clear solution. Okay. There is a provision, and in very far reaching, I think SEBI is the most ahead in terms of regulations around inheritance, around nominations. And one of the good things that has recently been done is that the nominee can be allowed to operate accounts if so authorized by the in the case of incapacity of the holder. Unfortunately, that does not apply to mental incapacitation. It only applies to physical incapacitation. So again, this third solution will not really work for mental incapacitation. Demat accounts are slightly more difficult because there is no concept of either or in a demat account. So when your securities are held in a demat account, in a mutual fund they can be held without a demat account. In a demat account, you need the signature of both holders to operate the account. Okay, so again you can probably use notarized power of attorney from the holder. Again, as I said, it's a gray area because the power of attorney becomes invalid moment the concerned individual becomes mentally incapacitated. Uh, but as I mentioned, the AMC will not, the DMAT provider will not know about it. So again, it's a huge gray area. Okay. Demat account with brokers helps. Okay. Because, they have a power of attorney to pull that securities where there is a sale transaction. So if the broking account itself, okay, if it is joint, but the demat account may be single, it can still be possible to do this, to at least sell, if nothing else. The other thing that I've seen clients do is that they create children and spouses as beneficiaries in advance, and that has to be done through a process that involves giving an OTP while you are in full senses and everything. And they would sign, delivery instruction slips in advance in their favor with all those securities mentioned. Uh, and then it is used to transfer. You still need OTPs. Again, very gray, extremely gray. So really speaking, with demat accounts, there doesn't seem to be a foolproof solution. With bank accounts and mutual funds, the joint account route, either or any one survivor route, is a clear cut and solution, provided, of course, you are willing to trust the other person. These are some other things that people do. I'm not expressing whether this is right or wrong. Providing access to the mobile to the trusted person. For example, the uh, unlock codes on my phone are there with my spouse. That carries lots of other risks that are not limited to financial risks. But I mean, we need to overcome, at least I needed to overcome them. So she has access to my mobile at any point of time. Obviously, it's a vulnerability. Your mobile has become your bank now. So obviously, if my mobile goes on the blink or there is no signal, I become paranoid, and people should become paranoid. I use a password vault called LastPass, and that allows me to share that with the people I trust, and that will help them retrieve some of the data. So that was a quick run through. We're running completely out of time. So why should you worry about this? Okay, this is not going to happen to you. Why should you worry? Okay, and here I'm just borrowing something from the video that I saw of the Hinduja clinic. Uh, Indra asked Yudhishthir, what is the most astounding thing on earth? सबसे ज्यादा अचंभे की क्या बात है? And Yudhishthira tells Indra, the greatest wonder in this earth is that lakhs of people die every year, and yet the people left behind, okay, feel that they are immortal, that they are never going to die. I think something similar happens to us with disability. We hear stories of this happening to other people, and we will say, oh, but this will never happen to me. I think it is time to think, do you want to impose this kind of a burden on your family, the kind of decision making that they need to do, the kind of running around that they need to do? Do you want to impose that? So, letting them know is very, very important. Plus, there is an urgent need to codify the law on advanced medical directive. It should not remain a Supreme Court mandated law. Access to financial assets, something on the lines of lasting power of attorney. More importantly, we need to create a state infrastructure, the office of the public guardian, something akin to the office of the public guardian, something akin to the court of protection to manage all these issues. The thing about this, these are not people without money. We are not talking of people without money. We are not talking of putting a burden on the state's exchequer. This can be self sustaining. These people can pay for themselves. There can be fees for these services that will make these infrastructure self sustaining. I think the state owes it to its citizens for this kind of an infrastructure and this kind of a law to be put in place. It is our right. But for that right to be activated, all of us will have to work and advocate. The government needs to know that a lot of people are asking for this. I think with that, I'm going to end the presentation. We have run out of time, but uh, maybe if some extension is allowed, we can probably take one or two questions.
Yes, sir, we
Anilji?
can take some fast question based on the will and the custodian part, which has been asked by the attendees. So that
Okay.
two, three questions majorly come out of the regarding the will. So like Mr. Pavan has asked, where can we find a legal reference from government resources for processes such as hospital process, where to keep the living will, etc. Because we are talking about keeping the will as an accessible manner. So where to keep it?
So I think the resources in terms of, as I mentioned, and we have probably shared it in the chat, for the documentation formats, etc., and other things, you can find it on Vidhi Legal. There is a very important white paper that is there on Money Life Foundation. There is, Hinduja Clinic conducts, and it helps people actually in drafting out their living wills. So that deals, of course, with the health part, which is what is allowed here. So of course, Hinduja Hospital is in Bombay, but there are a lot of online videos that they have, and I intend to reach out to them to see at ARIA, which is the Association of Registered Investment Advisors. Also, we will try and see what are the resources we can put together to let people know where they can register these, what are the medical formalities. I think for medical formalities, the Hinduja Hospital Living Will Clinic would be an ideal solution.
Noted, sir. So one more question, like if the person is not living in Mumbai, but and they want to submit a copy of custodian, so as a provision, yes or no? If yes, then how to proceed?
So this is a Supreme Court order. So obviously, at some point of time, every state will have to do it. Right now, it's Karnataka and Maharashtra who have done it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Every state will have to do it. I would suggest, please do the first part. Please at least do the part till you get it notarized, even if you are not in Karnataka or Maharashtra. Okay. At least get to the notarized part within the next months, few months, I think we should see this being rolled out. And as more and more awareness gathers, as more of us write on social media about this, I think we will see a quickening of the pace around this issue.
Okay. Um, so could you just help some of the attendees to find out any easy institution or firms which are doing or any help matter for the get living will for their family members?
So I think you will find several. So as I said, several free resources are available in the Hinduja Living Will Clinic. So we are talking of only the health related part. Okay,
Right.
the health related part, there are several resources that you can find on the Hinduja Living Will. You will find videos. I think there are other resources as well. On Vidhi Legal, you will find those resources. As I'm saying, I'm saying that we will go back and see what ARIA can do on this as well. In terms of firms, I mean, a lot of lawyers, legal firms, okay, and the registered investment advisors, some of them would be happy to sort of look at this. But again, as I'm saying, the real important part is for you to start thinking about it and acting uh, on it.
Okay. So just a little bit deviated questions from our presentation, but we can take it. Like, can we use family settlement deed to handle situations? Like, what is difference between exactly family settlement deed and a will?
So this is obviously come from Maharashtra. Family settlement deed is an inheritance question. I don't think it has
Right.
anything to do. It has to do with how assets will be inherited. So I don't think it has any relevance to the subject that we are covering today.
Correct. So most of the question which has been asked by the attendees regarding disability we are covered. Nonetheless, there are other questions like power of attorney which are not getting covered today. So, and many of the attendees have appreciated the presentation, sir. So thank you for the brief and crisp presentation regarding the your personal issue with which we have related to the concern disability matters for the today's presentation.
So
So,
somebody has raised a very interesting thing there. Ki could we challenge a living will? Okay.
right,
So I'm not aware what Mr. Dipender Kumar wants to know. First of all, today, at least in India, the only thing that is there is the advanced medical directive. And even its registration right now is still under process. It's happening in Mumbai, and the first living will was sort of registered maybe a couple of months back, or maybe 6 months back or so. So I think we are in early days yet. Challenges, etc. Any document can be challenged. So I mean, that is the citizen's right to challenge a document. But I think we are in very, very early days to have any comment on that. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to, bring forward something that's very close to my heart. It touches the most primal fear or apprehension that I have. I'm sure a lot of other people have similar apprehensions. My point is that when you do something about that, it helps lessen the burden. My The way I'm dealing with it is that I am advocating this so that helps me in dealing with these fears. I'm sure with everybody's cooperation, and support, we can sort of take this to the right authorities and convey. So there is no, I don't think there can be any serious political opposition to this. It is just that we have to make sure that people in power or in authority understand that this is an important issue.
So thank you, sir. Summing up the today's webinar officially, uh, thanking our audience for the thought-provoking questions to our speakers as well. And last but not the least, thank you, Harsh, sir, for giving us the insights and your sharing your personal thoughts on the respective topics today. Thank you so much, each and everyone, for joining.